Hey, this is John with Smart Edition Academy, and in today's video, we're going to go over the best way to approach the TEAS exam. We'll go over a simple outline of where to start and how to study, and we'll also talk about how to identify good resources that are going to help you in this whole process. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now before we do that, check out the description below. There's a bunch of helpful links in there. There's a link to a free practice test for the TEAS. There's a link to our Facebook study group, which is really awesome. It's filled with thousands of people who are just like you studying for the TEAS exam. They are sharing their resources that are working for them, things that are not working for them, asking questions, posting practice test questions, and generally just supporting each other. So I really want you to be a part of that community so that you can benefit from that. So if you are on Facebook, click that link and join the group. Now you'll also see links to things like the Smart Edition Academy study guide, the online course, practice test packs, and we also have links to other videos that kind of go along with this video. I'll talk about those a little bit as we go along. But check out all that stuff, great resources. And with that said, let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first thing you need to do when you're starting to approach the TEAS test, how do I even start? There's so much material, where do I start? That's a very common question. So the best way to start is to really do an assessment or an inventory of what your strengths and your weaknesses are. Now the best way to do that is to take a free practice test or any practice test. And if you have a book already, you can use those. If you have an online course, you can use those practice tests. There's one in the link below in the description. But those practice tests should help you identify your strengths and weaknesses. Now I can't speak to all the practice tests out there, but I know Smart Edition's practice test has a scored report at the end of it that does a really good job of breaking down the specific topics that you got right or wrong, those questions tied to the topic, and so helps you understand, what those weaknesses are. Not all tests have that, but I know that ours does, and it does a really good job of doing that. Now that's important because you can't just say, my weakness is math or my weakness is science. There's so much in math on the TEAS test, there's so much in science that you need to know specifically what exactly are you having the most trouble with. And you could say everything. I'm terrible at everything. I don't know where to start. I mean, all I can say to that is, you better get going. Let's get going. You can do this. It's totally achievable. And with a lot of this guidance, you can totally do it. So don't worry if you feel like you need to study everything, but really try and focus on specific topics that you're identifying as being your weaknesses. Now, I don't want you to rely entirely on practice tests. You should be using your own intuition, your own gut feeling on how well you feel about those specific topics, how well you think you know them. And you can do different things like rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 on how well you know it, or a scale of 1 to 10, or you might write down those topics and then color code it. So you could say red for I do not feel comfortable with this, green for I feel like I've mastered this topic, yellow, I'm okay, but I need more help. And you're going to use all this stuff when you go to create a study schedule and what you study and how much you study. So it's very important to be honest with yourself and really understand what these weak areas are. Now, after you've identified your weaknesses and the areas that you really need to be focusing on, the next thing you want to do is identify some good resources to begin your studying with. Now, we do a deeper dive into that with a video that is the top 10 resources for the TEAS test. And if you look in the description, there's a link to that video. So check that out. That'll at least give you some direction on what you might want to consider using as a good resource. Now, resources are important, and they're important that they're good because what they're going to help you do is understand and kind of know what you don't know. So you don't know what you don't know. You don't know the exact topics. You don't know what's on the test, what's not on the test, and that's what a good resource will help you do. Now, if it's a book, it's going to be that table of contents. It's going to really list out in detail what the topics are. If it's an online course, the lesson modules should kind of give you a really good idea of what all the topics are. Or I talked about the practice test scored report are going to list all those topics. So a good resource is going to do that. And then you also want to make sure you're using a resource that's from a reputable company or a company that specializes specifically in the TEAS, like Smart Edition Academy. Now there's other companies that work with this, and they don't really even have to be companies. They could be experts or gurus on YouTube and their channels. And as long as you kind of feel like you can trust them and they're trustworthy, then that could be a good resource for you. And when it comes to resources, the only one that I would kind of give a little bit of a heads up on, a lot of people like to use Quizlet, which is a great resource. If you're not familiar with it, it's a place where other students can kind of upload sort of flashcard decks on different material for the test. But the issue with that is that they might not be a specialized expert in the test, so they're getting their best guess on what's going to be on the test. And so you might end up with some stuff that's not on the test. You might end up wasting some time, so just be careful of that. But if you do know exactly what's on the test, it can be a great resource, but it's not going to be the first place to start or the only resource that you should be using. Alright, so the next step in this process, after you've identified your weak areas, you've identified what resources you want to be studying with, the next thing you want to do is develop a good study plan or a good study schedule. Now we do a pretty deep dive into that in another video. It's going to be in the description below, and I really want you to check that out. It is so worth your time because you will save so much time by really understanding how to make a good, effective study schedule that will help you retain this information over time. Now you could give yourself, say, 4 hours in a day to study. If you don't have a good plan or a good study schedule, you can end up kind of wasting a lot of that time or squandering it away. You could be staring at a page for 2 hours and not getting anything done, or you're not studying the right things. You might be studying stuff you already kind of know well already because you're just comfortable doing that. So this making a good study schedule will save you hours and hours and hours of time by being much more effective. So it is worth checking out that whole video. So I want you to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to go totally deep dive into it now. That's what that video is for. So check that out. Now we kind of get to the last part of this. You know your weaknesses, you have good resources, you've been studying it, you've been sticking to your schedule, sticking to the plan. You should be feeling better about those weak areas. So now what you do is go back and take another practice test. Now Smart Edition Academy gives you a lot of practice tests. We have 8 practice tests in our practice test packs or in our online courses. So that's more than enough. It's like 1,300 questions, but that is enough to go back and continue this process, continue to take another test. Now you have a benchmark of what your score was on the first practice test you took. Now you should start to see some improvement, and you might even want to make a goal for yourself saying, after I've gone through this whole process, I want to do 5 or 10% better on this subject or these topics. You can continue to take these practice tests, go through this whole process, and by the end of it, you should start to feel comfortable. You should start to feel good about yourself that you are getting an improvement on your scores. Now, your school or program is going to have a certain score that they're requiring, and by ending on these practice tests, you're going to get an idea of, am I getting close to that required score? Am I still way off? Am I ready to take the test yet? Should I scale down my studying because I'm doing really well, or am I pretty far behind? My test is coming up soon. I really need to double down on my study schedule and put in more hours approaching that test. You're going to be able to gauge and assess all that stuff. And by doing that, you're gonna get yourself to the right spot where you need to be when you get to the test day. So that's sort of the full cycle on how to approach the test. Now this video was really meant to be kind of short and sweet, just a way to approach it. We have deeper dives into some of these other subjects or topics on how to approach the test, so check those out. And if you have something that worked for you, drop it in the comments below, because people are reading those. They're really getting a lot of benefit from them, so we want everybody to see what's working for everybody. So do that, and then we'll put those other videos here so you can check those out. The how to create a study schedule, how to study effectively, those kinds of things. So until next time, good luck on your studying, and we'll see you in the next video.